There are four states of consciousness. There's wakefulness, there is sleep, there is dreaming, and then there is the transcendental moment. Most people spend the majority of their lives living in the first three realms of consciousness. And the last state of consciousness, the lucid transcendental moments, seem to be rare occasions that sneak up on us, where we're more awake in a dream than we are in the three-dimensional reality we live in. Are these rare moments reserved for coincidence when we pierce through the veil of our own conditioning to get a greater glimpse of the world we live in? Some people spend the majority of their lives trying to replicate that experience. Once you understand that you come preloaded with all the biological and neurological machinery to induce that state, then you can comprehend that there's a bridge between space-time and time-space that you can access through the activation of your own pineal gland. It's my hope that you'll be inspired to create that transcendental state without any use of any drug or exogenous substance. A transducer is a device that converts variations in physical quantity, such as pressure, like we talked about, into an electrical signal or vice versa. It is anything that receives a signal in the form of one type of energy and converts it to a signal of another form. For example, your TV antenna picks up frequencies and transduces it into imagery, and that's exactly what the pineal gland does. Take a look at this chart of the electromagnetic spectrum. You can see very slow waves with very long wavelengths, and you can see on the other end very high frequencies called cosmic rays. And as we said, when your eyes are picking up light, the wavelength of that light begins to activate serotonin and melatonin, and now we function in three-dimensional reality. Imagine in a meditation, your eyes are closed, melatonin levels are elevated because your eye is no longer perceiving light. There's an activation of the pineal gland. Once those crystals become electrically activated, now they function like a radio receiver, and they can pick up frequencies that are no longer consistent with visible light. Anything that's material that travels to the speed of light will turn into energy. Then the quantum field exists beyond the speed of light. Now, why is that important? Because once the pineal gland is activated, and now it functions like a radio receiver, what is the physics that combines the frequency that we're tapping into with our biology in our brain? The purpose of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind. And as you learned in previous episodes, what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And we could say then, the memory bank of the known self, the seat of our identity, our connection to our known three-dimensional reality, is the neocortex. As you begin to slow your brain waves down in meditation from beta to alpha and slowing down even further into theta, you begin to suppress thinking in the neocortex. And as you're no longer analyzing and you're no longer thinking, brain waves begin to slow down, and consciousness literally moves out of the neocortex and begins to move right into that limbic brain. Now, a person is conscious in their subconscious mind. And now the door between the conscious mind and subconscious mind is open, and now they're ready to access information. In other words, if your analytical thinking mind is functioning in high beta, you're separated from the operating system where you can begin to connect to the quantum field. So by practicing slowing your brain waves down and suppressing the neocortex, now you can use your radio receiver to begin to tune into frequencies that exist beyond your senses. Now take a look at this image of a neuron. A neuron receives input through its dendrites. It processes all of the information coming from all of those branches and integrates that information, processes that information, and then sends the information out in an output mechanism. Now, I want to talk about the transduction mechanism in the brain. Now, once the pineal gland becomes electrically activated, once those microcrystals begin to shimmer and oscillate, they can tune into frequencies that exist beyond your senses. And now, information in the form of frequency can be received as input into the pineal gland. The pineal gland begins to process it in the thalamus and in the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus then begins to send signals to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland begins to become the output mechanism and begins to release very vital neuropeptides. Remember, the quantum field is an invisible field of frequency that unifies and connects everything material. And its signature, as you get closer and closer to that very source energy, are greater and greater degrees of order, of harmony, of wholeness, of oneness. So when the pineal gland and the brain is functioning in a very coherent manner, it can now pick up a signal, and the orderliness begins to produce a very orderly chemical expression that begins to influence every one of the hormonal centers or energy centers of the body. At the very exact same time, the back part of the pituitary, called the posterior pituitary, begins to release different chemicals in the output mechanism. And one of those chemicals is called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is produced in the brain and in the heart. And once oxytocin levels are released, oxytocin seeps right into the amygdala, the survival center of the brain, and it shuts the lights out for fear, for pain, and for aggression or anger. And there's only a group of circuits left called love and joy. And all of a sudden then, oxytocin signals a chemical called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals another chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor. And that chemical causes the arteries in the heart and the lungs to literally dilate. And now we have more energy and more blood flow going right into the heart. And this center begins to awaken, and the person starts to feel an incredible gratitude for being alive. Now, the emotional signature of gratitude, when you are receiving something, or something that's just happened to you that you find pleasurable, you say thank you. So the emotional signature of gratitude means something's happening to you or something has happened to you, and you're in the ultimate state of receiving. Now that we're in the state of receiving, something amazing happens. All of a sudden now there's processing that goes back from the pineal gland right back to the pituitary, which then affects the thyroid, affects the heart and the thalamus, and all the way down the energy centers. And there's a cascade of chemistry that's created. Let's remember what happens when we do the breath. As you begin to move that energy up from those lower centers, once energy makes it to the fourth center, the energy will continue up into the brain. As it moves up and activates the pineal gland, and the pineal gland begins to signal the pituitary, now all of a sudden it begins to release its neuropeptides and neurohormones, we now know that there's an external electromagnetic field. Now, when the person starts to feel gratitude, they're in the perfect state of receiving, and now there's a reverse field that's coming in through the top of the head that begins to draw energy from the field right into the brain, and that frequency is carrying information. And this then is when the pineal gland causes melatonin to get an upgrade.